Welcome to TSIB Talks, where we share information on construction insurance and its possible effect on your business. Enjoy our latest episode.
Welcome back to TSIB Talks. Today we have some exciting guests. Both P and Andrew have joined me for this episode. Can you guys take a quick moment to introduce yourselves?
Good afternoon. My name is Pete DeLoya. I've been in the industry for 30 years in construction. The last 2 years I've been on the insurance team. My current role is as business development manager.
Hi, everyone. Andrew Pangalos, director here at TSIB. I've been with TSIB 10 years and in the insurance space for 20.
Thanks, guys, for the intro, and thank you again for being here. Let's kick things off with our first question. What should trade contractors know when working with a GC?
I feel that there are three areas that contractors should be aware of when working with a GC. Typical requirements, financial stability, and running a safe project are really the main three topics, and I'll go into a little bit of each one. On the typical requirements, all insurances on a project include general liability, workers' comp, auto liability at specified limits per the subcontract with the GC or the CM. Those are guaranteed in every project. Some financial stability items that they look at are bonding capacity and or capabilities of having a P&P bond available. Lastly, in running a safe project, it could be based on the project requirements. The subcontractors are contracted to do the project safely and efficiently. Safety issues on any project, which is through the experience mod rates and incident rates, are often part of the selection process as well.
So then what would be some common pitfalls that you could highlight, such as improper certificates of insurance?
Often where a contractor may have a pitfall comes in their certificates of insurance and what their coverages actually are based on. Contractors should always verify with their insurance agent that they have the full policies that are required per their certificates and that they actually contain the required coverages. Some cases also are where if they take it a step further, their coverages may be deficient. So if they're not meeting the required limits, they could result in a delay of a contract execution and or potential loss of a contract. So it is important for contractors to reach out to their brokers and have a good understanding of what they're actually able to carry.
Now, do you have any tips you can offer on reviewing contracts for insurance requirements?
A couple tips are making sure when you're dealing with your broker that you understand the project size, the location, the scope, and there are other variables as well. But every contract is written differently based off of those bullet points. A couple other potential shortfalls of requirements that could actually adversely affect the project team really need to be clarified up front and before contracts are being signed.
Okay, so then let's talk about what people should be looking for regarding their insurance. Andrew, can you explain the importance of adequate liability limits and endorsements like additional insured and waivers of subrogation?
Sure thing, Dom. Really, it's very important to understand the risk exposure, right? It's important for the contractor to not underestimate the exposure of an incident. Failing to meet contractual requirements can also disqualify a contractor from bidding, contract award, and could result in payment delays. Adequacy of limits is often tied to market and claim trends. So let's talk about some of the endorsements. The additional insured or AI endorsement extends the contractor's policy to cover the GC or the owner and minimizing coverage gaps and insurer disputes. The waiver of subrogation endorsement prevents a contractor's insurer from recovering costs from the GC or the owner's insurer and reducing lawsuits. This applies to general liability, workers' comp, and auto policies, and it'll be important to confirm contract requirements. And lastly, we'll touch on primary and non-contributory language, and this ensures the contractor's policy pays first, preventing the GC's insurance from activating too soon and reducing their costs.
Now, can you emphasize a little bit on the value of periodic reviews with brokers?
Periodic reviews with brokers is a critical exercise for contractors. Policy updates and coverage gaps are an important consideration. As the business grows, insurance must keep pace. So annual reviews to ensure coverage aligns with evolving needs is a critical exercise. Risk management strategies. Brokers help their clients secure better terms, cut costs, and support claims handling. Compliance with new contractual obligations is another important consideration. Regular check-ins with your broker prevent issues by ensuring insurance needs meets changing contract requirements. Your brokers can help with claims advocacy. A trusted broker streamlines claims, improves outcomes, and reduces disruptions. And a final consideration is efficient insurance costs. So alignment with your broker ensures that your insurance dollars spent are on the right types of insurance, including the right amount of insurance.
So from what you're sharing, it seems like having a good broker and being in alignment with them is key. Now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the life cycle of a project. Can you tell us about how insurance needs evolve through project phases such as pre-construction, active construction, and closeout?
Absolutely. As you noted, there typically are three phases in a construction project. There's your pre-construction, then that leads into the construction of the project, and then finally the closeout. I'll describe a little bit of each and how they interact with the life cycle of your insurance. During pre-con, typical requirements could include general liability, workers' comp, auto, often what I just mentioned earlier, and the contractual requirements. And depending on the contract and the tasks included by the pre-con team, there also could be professional liability. If there is any field exploratory work before actual construction starts, there may also have a need for pollution liability insurance as well. During the construction phase, there could be many different types of insurances, as well as who is responsible to obtain those insurances. Besides general liability, workers' comp, and auto as a standard insurances for contractors, if the contract includes a design build and or a design assist aspect, then professional liability will most likely be required by the contractor as well. Pollution liability, again as noted earlier, can also be a factor within the project. Depending on who procures the builder's risk insurance for a project as well, all contractors need to be aware not only of the deductibles, but if they are actually contractually obligated to pay for said deductibles. So in speaking specifically of builder's risk, several different entities within a project could purchase the builder's risk. The owner can purchase it. The general contractor can also purchase it as well. So depending on who purchases that and how the contracts are written, the deductibles may be a contractual obligation to you as a contractor. The last phase, the closeout phase, during this phase, coverages typically will not change and will be maintained throughout the closeout, specifically if there is still work in the field. If you as a contractor are enrolled in an OSIP or a CSIP, when that program ends, the contractor's house policies takes over as the primary coverage for any new scope on that project.
Yeah, Pete. I mean, I think you broke it down very well there, and I think it really gives our listeners a good understanding of the life cycle of a project. Now, Andrew, do you think you can go in to explain the ideal timing for engaging an insurance broker in one of these projects?
Sure thing, Dom. So engaging your insurance broker should happen both early and often. Ideally, you'd contact your broker during the pre-bid or planning phase to assess risks and insurance needs before contracts are signed. Your broker provides a risk assessment and advises on necessary coverage, identifying exposure areas that may not be obvious to you. Often, this is completed during contract review to obtain all the correct coverages. Your broker will discuss options with you like wrap-up policies or project-specific coverage to ensure proper protection and understand the contractual and insurance requirements that are being asked of you. Early involvement allows the broker to assist with underwriting, adjusting premiums, and coverage as the project scope evolves.
I think with that being said, as Andrew has alluded to that, and we started that really at the beginning of the podcast, it's very important for you as a contractor to have a good relationship up front with your broker from the moment you know that there's a bid right through to the closeout, so you have the proper coverage at all times during the project.
That's great additional context, Pete.
Now, do you think you can provide some examples of a checklist for GCs or owners?
Absolutely. Let's start with risk transfer. So subcontractor insurance. If you employ subcontractors, you need to confirm that they have the necessary coverage and require certificates of insurance or COIs before the work begins. Next consideration is your additional insured endorsements. Ensure subcontractors and contractors add the GC and owner as additional insured on their policies for coverage in case of a claim. Another consideration would be waiver of subrogation. So including a waiver of subrogation in contracts prevents insurers from suing the GC owner for claim payouts. Next consideration is contractual requirements. So your broker can help you review contracts for specific insurance terms, for example, limits, types, exclusions to ensure they align with the contract and the project needs.
With that, Andrew, one of the things as a contractor that you need to be aware of is not only do you have to meet the limits, the types, and the exclusions, but there may be an added cost to that. It may not be something that's carried in your base insurances. So with that being said, if you're bidding, if you're in the process of a bid, you need to make sure that you also have the cost for those insurances included in your bid.
Excellent point, Pete. So another important checklist item are contract reviews. So within the contract review, you want to ensure that the insurance requirements specified in the contract, such as general liability, workers' comp, builder's risk, and the limits, are all being addressed in the coverage that your broker is placing for you. You want to be mindful of policy terms and conditions, confirming the contract includes key endorsements and that they appear in the final policies. And then claims handling and reporting. Contracts should detail how claims are handled, reported, and who covers deductibles or excess costs. Your broker can help you identify those and translate what's being disclosed in the contract. Coverage gaps exist, and so you want to collaborate with your broker to identify potential coverage gaps, for example, offsite storage or demolition exclusions. And final consideration is when insurance should be in place. So as Pete mentioned earlier, your insurance should be in place before the work even begins. Ensuring your insurance is in place before any work starts, including pre-con activities like site prep or excavation. Your insurance should be in place and active during construction. Maintain ongoing coverage through the project, adjusting the policy as scope and or as risk exposure changes. And then, of course, you want to keep your insurance in place post-completion. This is an often overlooked period of the project where coverage is critical and may be needed after construction ends, especially for warranties, defects, or ongoing liabilities, such as completed operations coverage.
That's quite the checklist, and it seems extremely useful for GCs and owners. Now, can you both compare project-specific policies like CSIPs and OSIPs to standalone policies?
When we say the words RAP or CSIP or OSIP, what we're talking about are contractor-controlled insurance programs, again, or CSIP, or owner-controlled insurance programs, or OSIP. So CSIP, OSIP, RAP, all three of those terms basically mean similar things. CSIPs and OSIPs provide comprehensive coverage for all project participants under one umbrella, covering general liability, workers' compensation, and more. These programs centralize insurance and potentially lower premiums and offer better coverage control. It's ideal for large projects with multiple contractors or when the owner seeks more oversight.
Andrew, that was a great explanation on CSIPs and OSIPs. If there is not a project with a CSIP or an OSIP, at that point, contractors are using their own standalone policies. These policies are purchased by individual subcontractors and or contractors, and standalone policies cover only their specific operations, potentially leaving coverage gaps if subcontractors lack adequate insurance or required endorsements compared to the contractual requirements. So to understand that early on in a project, if it's not a CSIP or an OSIP, you are carrying your own policies. Those policies must match what the contract is asking for.
So to recap, CSIPs or OSIPs are often better for large or complex projects due to consolidated risk and broader coverage, while standalone policies may suffice for smaller projects or where the GC controls subcontractor insurance.
This is really interesting information, and I really think you guys are giving our listeners a lot of interesting information to hold on to and kind of learn from. Now, unfortunately, that is all the time that we have today, so I just want to say thank you to both of you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, and I know our listeners learned a lot. Thanks, guys.
Dom, appreciate you having Andrew and I on the podcast, and we look forward to future podcasts with you.
Thank you for the time today. We appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about contractor insurance.
Thanks for listening to this episode of TSIB Talks. If you like this content, be sure to follow for new episodes. Until next time.